Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
So I have got an album that you absolutely must have this record in your collection.
Well, why is that?
I don't know. Just think that every single record collector is supposed to have Herb Alpert, whipped cream, and other delights in their collection. You're just supposed to.
You're right. Okay. And welcome to Two Guys Talking About Records, especially ones that deal with whipped cream.
There you go. Careful there.
I'm Steve. I'm a record collector that
my name is...
I still don't have that album.
And my name's Jim, and I'm a record store owner, and I do have that album, and then I think I've got a few here in the store as well. That's how this works.
Yeah, I grew up with that. Yeah, that was AM radio in the 60s. I mean, about 50% of the songs on AM radio was Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. I mean, it was constant.
Yep. And we'll get into why you must have that record in your collection, along with several other must-haves, and just talk about the idea of, folks saying if you're a record collector, you've got to have a copy of this. It's an interesting concept. I think we have fallen prey to this, and I think we've said several times, you've got to have this in your collection here on the podcast. And now I'm questioning, is that really the thing to do, to tell people?
Yes. Well, what the hell? Yeah, it's just like, if they don't like it, at least they'll always remember you. Oh yeah, that one guy told me I should have it.
And we also have a little nugget of news for those of you who really kind of partake in a pricey subscription club service. We'll get to that here in a minute or so. I think that affects you directly, doesn't it?
The fleecing of the record collector.
There we go. But before we get to those subjects on today's episode, this is the Vinyl Community Podcast. So as such, each week we like to show off our recent additions to the collection, which, it's ever growing. It's got to slow down sometime, you think, right?
Been trying, and every time. Well, I had last week where I bought nothing.
That's true, and you had a couple old ones, but you made up for it this week, right?
Yeah, I did, and I'm only going to show half.
Oh, no. Well, what do you have for us this week, sir?
Well, we're going to start with make you work on this one. It's a group called Straight Arrows, brand new album. They're out of Australia, kind of indie rock, power pop, I guess you would say. The name of the album is called In the Surface World. In the Surface World, and yeah, it's really good. I learned about this from someone else's channel. I'm sure they told me it was essential. So I had to go out and buy it, obviously, and get it. They've been around for a while, I think for around 10 years or so, and have a variety of albums out there, but I've never bought them. But they are out of Australia. I did have to get it out of Australia. So, shipping, not the cheapest thing in the world, but really good music. Really like this. Straight Arrows. Good stuff.
Cool.
Then I know I had you try to find this, see if you could get this for me, and your distributor's wrap is the Jesus and Mary chain, the newest ones that came out this year. I was in a record store, and there it was. I go, well, let me get that. And I sometimes these groups, that you really, you love the music from, late 80s, 90s, and you go, man, those are some of my favorite albums. And then their later stuff, it's not as good. I think of the Pixies. I bought some of their later stuff, but I don't play it. I go back to their early stuff. So I was nervous about this, feeling that could happen with Jesus and Mary chain. I really like this. I thought they did an excellent job with this. Again, great indie rock. You have some of that shoegaze in there, but overall really good. They have a female, 2 songs. They have a female vocalist sing on here. A strong album by them. I was very happy on what I heard. It's had some trepidation going into this one, but it was worth it.
Those guys have been around for a long time as well.
Mid-80s. Mid-80s, the Reed brothers.
Yep. I would have said that they would have started off as an alternative, but not jangle. But now that you've said have they always been shoegaze? I guess is a great question.
Kind of, a lot of shoegaze bands put them as, the inspiration for it, because of all this, basically it's the Reed brothers. And when they started, they didn't know how to play their instruments. So they came up with the idea, if we just play them really loud, it doesn't matter,
Just drone them out.
That's what it was, because they go, well, we could practice, but they were both lazy, real lazy. They were satisfied with being on the dole in the UK. I mean, I read a great biography on them, and but they came up with that sound, and it turned into the shoegaze. Some would say kind of punk, post-punk, put them in there, but definitely the layers of drone and noise. Velvet Underground inspired.
There you go.
Yep. This one I used to have. Happy to bring it back in. Do you remember them, the Nomads?
No, not really.
Great garage rock out of the 80s from Sweden. And this is like a greatest hits. They're a big song on here, which you'll find on a lot of compilations, is Where the Wolfbane Blooms. Where the Wolfbane Blooms. But this is just a fantastic garage rock. And these guys, from Sweden, I really, this has kind of their hits that aren't hits. But it's fantastic 80s college rock. Garage rock, part of that garage rock revival that was going on, and great job, Sweden.
Looking forward to putting them on a playlist so I can hear them.
Yeah, you're going to like them. You're going to really like that. This was just one I took a chance on, and it's the group's called the Pastels. It's off the Creation label. Creation label, obviously known for My Bloody Valentine and a few others. So that's what caught my attention. And it's just a 12-inch EP, 4 songs. The first side is really kind of jangle pop. Again, it's from the 80s, mid 80s. So you have that jangle pop going on. But the second side, there was a song, what was it called? Baby Honey. And there was Velvet Underground inspired drone happening on it. I mean, you could you could hear that influence in that song. Oh God, that's really, really good. I'm really hung up on the Velvet Underground. All right. That's just life. I mean, I love that sound.
You didn't know that.
Too bad my family doesn't, but oh well. So this was a fun pickup to see and just try it. No idea. Really happy about it. And I definitely would if I saw their albums, but it's like they're not in the US, So this was kind of a lucky find in the new arrival bins. And just two last ones. I think that's improper English, but we'll deal with it. Spiritualized. So this is the group that came after Spaceman 3 broke up. And so one of the players, Jason, I think he even went by Jason Spaceman. He started the group Spiritualized. And it was kind of a continuation of Spaceman 3. Some of the religious overtones are in there. And that droning, Spaceman 3, but lighter. Spaceman 3 light, I guess you could say.
Okay.
And so I used to have it on CD. And so I thought, you know what? I pretty much got most of Spaceman 3 because they have Velvet Underground undertones.
Yep, they do.
There we go. So I thought, I have one Spiritualized. I really like it. I need to get more because I know of them. And so it was nice to pick this back up. And
you keep that up, and we're going to have to change the name of the podcast to Two Guys Droning.
Yeah, droning on and on and on.
I don't know if folks would like us staring down at our shoes the entire time.
Like Velvet Underground Sister Ray. It just keeps going. It never quits. And the final one I'll show is, you've been, how often you kind of go, why don't I have Dr. Dre in here? And so The Chronic. I had it on CD again. I'm actually working on a video for 1992. This came out in 1992, and so there was a few of those that were essential albums of 92 that I felt I should bring in, and this is one of them. this it's getting toward the end of where I'm getting my interest in rap, except like Beastie Boys. I liked what they did, but they kind of went more rock. So this was fun to have. Good to listen to. A lot of it goes above my head, whatever they're talking about, but that's fine. Great beats, and that's what I enjoy. And Snoop Dogg's on here, and he really sounds good. So that's all I'm going to show, Jim.
Oh, man. So I had a very light week compared to yours. Seems I'm going in waves on this, but I got a couple of goodies in here. First up, from 1974, I'm continuing kind of this exploration into the Traffic family tree. And what a nice copy of this. I've had this in the store several times before, and I just finally decided the other day to give it a listen. It is When the Eagle Flies. So it's Winwood and Capaldi and company. And it is, I'm trying to get past a lot of the the Traffic that you always see in here, Low Spark especially. Mm-hmm. And I've got a couple of early Traffic albums that I'll go to from time to time, but I've never really given this one much of a go. And this is later. I believe this is a little bit later in their career before they started really breaking, going their separate ways. But it has that core of Winwood and Capaldi still. Yeah. And the first playthrough on it, I think it was fairly enjoyable. I'll give it another one, but I do think that this is a worthy addition to that vein of music coming from Steve Winwood. And if we should do something sometime down the line about these ideas of family trees for bands and see where they go, because I've also found myself digging a little bit further into some of the Jim Capaldi stuff and some of the Dave Mason stuff as well. So, and I think we talked about Dave Mason. He's on my guilty pleasure list with a couple of the solos. So. Yeah. Always fun. Okay, and then the second pickup this week, I didn't get to it last week because I hadn't had a chance to open it, so I'm going to include it this week. But this another bootleg, another unofficial bootleg, another triple. It's getting ridiculous in this case. Pink Floyd. This is the Perfect Union Deep in Space. So this is actually a triple LP performance. From Brescia, Italy, recorded in June of 1971. So you've got that post Barrett with the core of Floyd in here on this one, and nothing special about it. It's not a gatefold, but it is a triple LP on some very nice looking red vinyl in through there. So at least it's got that going for it, which is nice. Giving this a listen, it's a decent sounding bootleg. This has obviously been bootlegged several times before, but this is just a newer pressing. Supposedly, it's a limited edition of 300 copies. Again, can you trust those European bootleggers? Yeah. It says here for the first time is the complete gig from the Brescia, recorded professionally by a sound engineer using, and then they get into the microphones that they use in here for the difference that makes. The original tape was played a few times after the concert, then left safe without ever being touched since. There's some broken English on here. With the 50th anniversary of this concert, so man, that's a few years back already now, the new transfer was done, and this is the incredible result. The quality is outstanding, perhaps one of the best audience recordings. Not the best. We've heard better. That other Pink Floyd boot we have with the Spaceman on the cover is excellent, but this is it's close. It's a decent sounding recording, and it's long. Holy cow! The triple LP set. The problem is now that we're getting, if you're looking at some of these Pink Floyd bootlegs of the unofficials of that era, and you're starting to collect individual concerts, a lot of these concerts are sounding the same as other concerts because they were really at their peak and they're performing. But I think I've got those songs in those versions live with other bootlegs, and so I think I'm going to back off on that era of bootleg, especially the triple LP. It was a fairly expensive one to add in. So
does that focus on echoes? Would you say
echoes is one whole side?
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
as it should be. I mean, as it should be. So. But I'm a sucker for the Pink Floyd boots as well, so I've been pulling those in, and when I see them, but that was not a cheap one, unfortunately. So I didn't even get one for the store because I don't think that something of that nature, be in the $70 to $80 range, would be. Yeah, you'd have to be fairly serious to have somebody trip across that and say, "Oh, cool."
Yeah, you didn't even toss out the fishing line with the worm on it to me. Wow.
No, well, I can get you one still if you want one.
Sounds like they probably kind of sound similar to what I have.
It sounds almost exactly to what you have with the other one, and just colored vinyl. And
Yep,
no, the artwork is it leaves a little to be desired.
sure. But it's limited.
So
Only
it
300.
is limited. 300. I've got one of 300 copies of that pressing. You know, they
Of the
did
red
seven
vinyl.
pressings of, yeah, they did 700 pressings of 300. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what goes. As always, with our pickups and all of the albums that we talk about throughout the show today, you folks can look for the Spotify playlist, since we're not including the sound clips for copyright reasons. But we'll put that Spotify playlist up. It'll be in the description on our Spotify channel. It'll be in the description of the YouTube channel, and we'll put it up on our Facebook page as well. So you can go through, and to the best of my ability, Steve challenges me every week whether or not I can find sound clips from all of these bands that you pull up. And that live Floyd's going to be a tricky one too. So I'll probably just put up a live echoes from somewhere and we'll call that good. So how many of those must you have? But we'll talk about that in just a second. I saw some news come through, and I sent you a text yesterday, and you knew about this already.
Yeah.
I figured you would, but I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd like to talk about this as a very timely subject matter. And that is this email that was sent out by the folks at Vinyl Me Please. You got an email from the president of Vinyl Me Please, did you not?
I know.
Wow,
It's just awesome.
Right to Steve. He said, "Hey, Steve."
Yeah. Guess what?
Guess what? And
yeah.
what did they tell you? He wasn't writing to say hello and thank you for being a customer, was he?
No, not quite. But subscription prices now, if you're going up like to $54 a month, $54 for an album, and that can be a single disc. Sometimes it's 2 discs, but it's really jumping up, and there's a variety of reasons, obviously, that's happening. They say shipping's gone up because at that $54 it's free shipping. Media mail, how much is media mail really cost?
Media mail has jumped again. It's over $5 for a single LP, and I've shipped some, like whenever you get a care package, there's at least 3 or 4 records in there, and it's upwards of $6-7. What used to be $3 a few years ago.
A couple of the other reasons is, for one thing, it's getting harder, the licensing to get an album. When Vinyl Me Please started, there wasn't many people out there, and so they could get the really good stuff, and they were repressing it and putting it out. Now there's so many other companies grabbing at this stuff, trying to get it. Vinyl Me Please is struggling to get good stuff, and you could see that in their selection of the month. Rarely will I accept the selection of the month because it's like, I don't need it, or God, it's been around and around, it's been repressed again and again. Why? And so I kind of pass up and I go for that credit. And so the cost of trying to find something better, it's eating into their profits. And so that is a big part of it, which everyone's struggling, just too many people out there. The other part is, if for those in Europe, they're canceling all those subscriptions. Once it's up, they're done. And it's just the shipping. They 15% of their subscriptions come out of Europe, but they lose money. It costs them too much because the shipping is so expensive. Now, they could still buy one at regular price and pay the shipping to get it, which is going to, again, be astronomical because you have shipping. Then, of course, most of them have different fees and things you got to pay extra to the government. So it's just financially, it's a drain. So they're going to stop that. So, yeah, the prices did jump dramatically, I think from 46 to 54. And it just, when you think about $54, I mean, if I go to a record store and I say a single album for $54, am I going to grab it? I seriously doubt it. But
it has to be the right one.
Yeah. But yet I'm in a subscription service because, it just comes out of my account. You don't really see it. It's not hurting your, you just don't feel it as much. I mean, it's there, it's coming out, but you don't think about it as much. Oh, here it is. So I truly, I'm probably going to get out of Vinyl Me Please. I got rid of half my credit. it's just I'm struggling to find anything I want. Because it's so many again these groups you have no idea about. They're newer, but they can get them on. They can get them in there, so they're cheaper to produce and put out, and they're probably for people a lot younger than me. And so, even the classic rock, it's just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
super. They put out some blues, but they're not essential. They're not essential blues. It's just like okay album, but really that's for $54 I can get it in a bargain bin. So yeah, I some people feel Vinyl Me Please will be okay. This is going to help them. It's going to help solidify them and make them better. Others feel it's just a death knell, that's just, hey, it's just we're struggling. They've been having some sales and stuff, trying to move out where they'll put in, it's a two, we'll give you 2 albums for the price of one, as they're trying to move out product because they're limited, like your 300 limited.
Yeah.
And for, they've had 300 of those and they've been there for a couple of years. No one's caring. So yeah,
from the record store side of things, I can feel that as well. You take a chance on a newer artist or something like that that's unproven, and you end up sitting on an expensive record for a long time, even physically in stores like this. It gets a little trying.
It does, and you see that wherever you go. And I've been a member since 2017, so I've been with them a long time. I've had some great box sets I've bought from them, but they've even they've new stuff, box sets or whatever. It's taken them months to get it out. I mean, it's just they can't get it done, and so it's backlog. They have a Barbie box set, Jim. The Barbie soundtrack was so huge, they went, we're doing a big box set for $210 for Barbie. Now, again, maybe it's appealing to a whole bunch of people younger, but truly you need that. Wow, you want to spend $200? I get a little Barbie card and something like that. I don't get it.
And you passed on that, which then fed into your credit system, which you cannot use on the stuff you want, like the other box sets.
Yeah. Well, luckily that one wasn't required, so I would have had to buy. But the other box sets are just not like it had been. When I got the Zamrock, when I got the Grateful Dead, a couple other ones. They put out a Miles Davis one, but I had all those albums. There's one on Impulse that it's kind of has me thinking, but yet there's albums in there I really, I don't want. And so overall, the packaging is very nice, but am I paying a whole bunch of money for something that, it's okay, but I'm not going to play it.
One of the videos that I saw on this announcement from Vinyl Me Please said that there was the opinion that this could be a case of a giant corporation, in this case Vinyl Me Please, realizing that they have to shrink in order to grow. They've got to lose money in order to make themselves viable in the long run. And I think you kind of you alluded to that this is something that they feel is necessary for their survival. Meaning that we know we're going to lose customers. They're going to lose you. They're going to lose Europe. And there's going to be a lot of people that say no, but in doing so, that would ensure, and this is again, an opinion from another YouTuber saying that in losing customers, they're ensuring that they'll be there for the core. They'll just exist, but in a much smaller scope.
Yep, smaller, more profitable, so they can keep going. But how much more do you want to charge for a record album? I mean, I hear we're pushing a breaking point on there, and you used to get a big book. Now they've made it small. I guess there used to be some small ones, but you don't get nearly what you used to get into these packages. And our friend Chance, he had on his podcast Surface Noise, they were talking about this too, and there was the feeling that this is the end. But I've had other ones who say it's not the end, but you're doing what a good business has to do, and you do. If you're losing, you got to restructure and rethink it over to keep going.
Well, best of luck to them, and I guess we'll just pay attention and see. And when the time comes for you to let it go, we'll talk about that again.
Yeah, I got $300 I got to still blow in there, so
Okay, then.
it's in case.
Definitely worth watching, and it falls back into the discussions we've had about the price of vinyl just seemingly going up, up, and up, and it needs to something needs to give.
Mm-hmm. Definitely so. Wow.
Well, how essential would you say some of those Vinyl Me Please records are for your collection?
There hasn't
You
been
have to have them.
yeah, there's nothing I've needed to have for quite some time.
Now, at the start of the episode, we joked around about the Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, whipped cream, and other delights. I am hard pressed to think of any record collector, serious record collector. You joke about this, saying you have to have a copy of this in your collection. Well, why? And you say, well, the cover. Okay.
Yeah.
I've had Herb Alpert in my collection for many, many years because, hey, it's a cool album cover. You got to have this. I can count on one hand and at probably one or two fingers the amount of times I've actually listened to it. So
Yeah.
why is this a must-have is the question we're going to attempt to tackle on this today. And that was brought about by a commenter on one of our videos when we talked about some of our albums that that we like, but we may not be very popular with others. And I brought up my Mothers of Invention, the Frank Zappa album Freak Out. And the idea that this is, I was told, I think I mentioned, I was told you have to have a copy of this in your collection. And so I added it, and I just don't listen to it very often. I do listen to it and I do enjoy it. I think I mentioned that last week, but I only enjoy one side of a double LP pretty much. So what makes an album an essential to have? And who are we, Steve? Who are we? And who are these other numerous YouTubers and musical columnists who say you have to have this? I did a search, just a general search, and was inundated with list upon list upon list of articles saying these are the essential albums you have to have in your collection if you're a collector.
Yeah, it's very opinionated. It's opinion by your age. It could, by your sex. There's no doubt. Though I don't hear many from women. These are your essential albums. Quite. I mean, it's very much a guy-dominated kind of thing. But it's by your taste in music, your genres that you prefer, because that's such a big factor in it, where you're an expert in doing that. Jim, when my first collection, I bought the book 1001 albums you need to have, listen to before you die. Yep. That was like a Bible as I was going through and buying albums, and I'd go to used record stores and I'd be looking for these. This was in the 80s when a lot of them you could find really cheap. And so these are your essentials. I read, okay, here's why. And I go home and I think, that's absolute crap. I don't like this at all. And when I look at these top lists, I just there's several that just stand out. Joni Mitchell's Blue is always in these lists, and a few other Joni Mitchell. I don't like her voice. I just don't. I don't want to play her. I have zero interest. But I had a bunch of Joni Mitchell. Why? She was essential. This collection, she's missing. She's gone missing. There's posters out there. Have you seen Joni Mitchell? They're not there. There was Captain Beefheart. I bought Captain Beefheart. It's essential. Every list. Trout Mass Replica. You and I have talked about that. Don't get it.
Nope.
I don't. Why is that? It's essential because of what they're doing, the time signatures, and how we're trying something new and different. But that doesn't, to me, essential is a listening experience that I'm really going to enjoy. A lot of the lists now have Radiohead on there, Kid A, or what was that other one? OK Computer.
OK Computer. Yep.
I don't get it. I don't put that on and go, God, this is great. I put it on and go, oh, I fell asleep again. So, and we have those, Jim. I'm sure you have some.
And like that. The idea, I think, of music, rock music in particular, and we'll stick. I mean, you could talk essential jazz, you can talk essential, and country and the like. We'll stick to rock for today's discussion. But I think you can argue that time frame wise, in the mid '60s, starting with the Beatles and Elvis, before into the '50s and '60s, and the Rolling Stones especially. But you've got some albums that could be considered culturally significant, and therefore they end up on must-have essential lists. Now, in looking at some of these that I've seen, we'll talk about the Beatles. Most everything I'd seen talking about essential Beatles ends up with Sergeant Pepper. And of course, you're going to get Magical Mystery. You're going to get all sorts of Revolvers on there. But if you really kind of narrow it down, it comes down to saying, okay, Sergeant Pepper is one of the most essential Beatles albums to have. And I'm not a Beatles expert by any means. I've got several Beatles albums and I enjoy them and I like listening to them, but I don't know how I would argue them being essential, but they're in my collection because I enjoy them. So the Rolling Stones, and I'll go to this and then we'll get back to you too. I had that same conundrum when you've got bands who've had such an impact as the Beatles and the Stones had early on in the storied history of rock and roll. And the Beatles, it was a little easier, I think, because they've got a smaller amount of albums compared to the Stones, who've got that 60 plus years working on it now. But time and again, you see things like Beggar's Banquet as one of the essentials, and this is actually a go-to for me often, is you get Exile on Main Street as an essential. So these are considered essential. They're in my collection, but I do enjoy them and go to them. But I think the idea of cultural significance is something that comes into play when some of these lists are saying, hey, you need to listen to this one. You need to have this one.
Yeah, I am. You saw Sergeant Pepper. As I'm going through list after list after list, just seeing what people say. The Beatles one that kept coming up was Abbey Road as the essential Beatles album. I'm not an Abbey Road fan. I just, to me, it wasn't essential. I mean, the sidewalk now is essential. If you go to London, it's essential that you go there and walk across that and get a picture taken. The traffic really likes that. I mean, there's great stuff on here. I mean, well, come together, but overall, it doesn't do me. For me, it's Revolver. I mean, would be, if I had to say this is the essential Beatles, Revolver's it for me, even over Sergeant Pepper's. But this one kept showing up. This does come up, but not as high, and so it makes a difference. But one I just picked up, and I just did finally because everyone talks about it, but it's always on the essential list, but it sure wasn't why I bought it, was the first Black Sabbath. Now, I know why people will say it's essential. This influenced a lot of bands. Extremely influential. And a lot of collectors, this was such an important album as they bought that and they go, wow, this is heavy, man.
Well, it's heavy in the fact that is touted to be the birth of heavy metal.
Yeah.
That album in particular, but that album in particular is the start of what has become heavy metal.
Yep. And so, again, putting it as essential. But for my musical taste, it's not essential. My heavy metal collection, though people have been giving me stuff and I've enjoyed it. I like, some Iron Maiden someone sent me. I liked it. I liked what they sent. But it's not what I would buy, normally or go for. And again, I've never had this. I had it in a CD. I played it once maybe, but I did buy it. Is it good? Yeah. Did I like it? Yeah. Except for the creepy witch thing that I'm pretty sure I've been cursed or whatever, that there's one of these satanic albums now in my collection, but it
play it backwards on Halloween.
Yes. It's not essential to me.
Now, the same vein of essential, but not necessarily to me. And everybody they talk about Pet Sounds as being an important, culturally significant. It's important for the development of music and rock. And this is the only Beach Boys album that I own. That's it. I've never really been a fan. This one, I guess, kind of bridges that time when the Beach Boys were psychedelic, but before they moved into just the straight up beach pop sound, Southern California beach pop. and it does have stuff on there, but I get it why that this is an influential album, and I've listened to it. This particular one is in my collection, not because I go to it often, but I once in a while I'll play it, or if I have a sealed copy in the store, I'll go to it. But it's also kind of a valuable, and this one is a mono Scranton, which is way up there in Discogs. And when I got this, I'm like, well, I could probably sell it in the store, but it'd be in the triple digits, high triple digits, because it is in absolutely just perfect shape all the way around. And so I thought, well, I think I'm just going to hold on to this. If I get a Beach Boys aficionado that comes through and they're looking for something, then we'll talk, meaning that this is essential for my collection because it's an important album that I want to have in there. But it's not essential enough for somebody to come in and say, hey, do you happen to have a mono Scranton Beach Boys? I'd be willing to pay $500 for that. And I feel let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. That is the one. I have it also. How often do I pull it? Maybe every few years, possibly. I don't know. Do I like the music on it? I do, but it's not part of my listening. Here's one that was popping up a lot. Blondie Parallel Lines. I like this album. I think it's a good album. Is it an essential? I don't find it to be essential. It's a great pop album, and
that pops up on some lists, huh?
It does. I was surprised how many times it popped up. And then there's this one, which is a head scratcher. We just talked about this.
Yeah.
Hot Rats.
Now, okay, here's the thing. That is my favorite Zappa album. I will go to that more often than any other Zappa, simply because I feel it's a great jam album.
Mm-hmm.
It's more instrumental than it is otherwise, but that's my go-to on Zappa.
And again, I'm not a Zappa fan. So to say, but I did have Freak Out. Why? It was as an essential album in that book. So I bought it. I bought this. Why? It was considered an essential. Now I did find this in the collect. We just talked about it recently. It was in a class I was going through. I said, well, I'll just get it because it's essential. But I go, well, Jim, I don't know. There's a few other Zappa. Well, the Weasels Ripped My Flesh. That one it's like,
no, you get that for the cover and that's it.
Yeah, it kind of sucks in my opinion. But yeah, this one is better. It is more listenable. I'm going to give it that. This is definitely more listenable for me.
Let's toss this out there too.
Yeah.
Same concept. King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King. You see this on lists everywhere all the time, and I do enjoy this. But much like Freak Out, side one. I like side one, and I like some of the other King Crimson stuff in my collection. But side two, you flip that over, and it gets a little too experimental for my tastes. I'm like, okay. You can't dance to it either.
Yeah, there you have it.
But this, I think, is another example of that combination of just a very intriguing cover art, cover artwork on this, as well as some influential music to get it on these lists is essential. And again, this I have my copy here at the store with me because I will throw it on and play it when I've got some reissues to sell, or if I get another early one, we'll put it out there. But not really a go-to.
I have that because of the cover art.
Yep.
When I left Puerto Rico, I took that cover art and I drew this huge mural for a guy in his office. It was just put it up on his wall of that. The guy, he still has it up there. So
very cool.
I put some commentary with it, that it dealt with. But yeah, this one, it's a very good album. That is called Essential, and I do like it.
Yeah.
But Odyssey and Oracle. But if I I don't have to have it. Now, why did I buy it? Well, this was an original. It was at Radio Wasteland.
I remember that.
Yeah, I was like, well, that would be cool to have. Yeah, but it's not one that if I lost it, I would say, I got to replace it. I got to replace it because I don't spin it that much. And it kind of goes back again, I think, to the time frame of the music that I buy. If you looked at a lot of stuff that I would say would be essential, it's going to go mid 70s forward. And not so much of the classic age of the 60s, which music was changing dramatically, but it changed in the 70s, music changed in the 80s, it changed in the 90s. It just comes down to a lot of times your age.
Yep, your preferences in through there.
Yeah.
I've got one that I've softened on, and I've never been a real Bob Dylan fan, so to speak. But
me neither.
Over the past few years, I have been. It's been growing on me. I'll put it that way too. And so this even goes back to the movie High Fidelity. It's like, oh, you don't have blonde on blonde. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. So, and again, this is another one of those that is considered a very essential album. And when I had a chance to pick up a good original Columbia 2i on this one, I jumped on it and thought, okay, this is good. And I started getting into it. It's still not an often go-to, but when I play it, I do enjoy it. So
yeah,
one of those ones that I think in that case where it's growing on me enough to say that yes, it's an essential, and I picked it up because it's an essential, but now I'm starting to get it. Some of these other ones I don't, but I'm starting to get that one.
Sure. And repeated listings is what it takes. And we've talked about this before, is when we were younger, we would take an album, we would sit down, we would play it over and over, we would study that album. And if in our ears to this day, that's still an essential album because it meant so much to us. Yep. Big part. I think we both would say Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. You have to have
multiple copies. We've talked about that before.
Exactly.
Multiple copies. This is that picture disc one. So it's essential enough that I've got, I think, 5 different Dark Sides and then other variations from other artists kicking through. Is it my favorite Pink Floyd album? As we've discussed many times, no. But I do enjoy it. And it can be essential.
Yep.
Enough to own 5 copies.
Now, there's on the list, this one always pops up. It's not rock, but kind of blue, which I've talked about as my favorite album of all time. It is on every single list, and I get it. I mean, to me, it is. I would rank this as highly essential, something everybody should have, and the same as with his Bitches Brew. I mean, I just these are the two desert island type albums that I would, they're both top 10 for me of all time in my collection. And I never have tired of them. And that's where a lot of times with any essential album is you don't tire of it. You can put it on every time and go, wow, this is just, it makes me happy. It makes me feel good. And it brings emotion out. And that's what these do, which I would put them as essential.
And I did not bring out my copy of Rush Permanent Waves today, although that would fall directly into that category. I've gone to that well. I've gone to that well a lot, but that for me, it's the same thing. I could listen to it over and over and over again, enough that I can play most of it in my head if I don't have access to it.
Wonderful.
If I'm out working in the woods or something like that, I can call it up in my brain, and still, that's how often I've listened to it. It's ingrained in there enough to go.
But that's essential to you.
That is very essential. Yeah.
If you had to restart your record collection over, that would be one of your number one top priority albums that you would have to buy. Essential. This was one of my top priority. Had to have it. Bring it back. Essential.
Each to their own. I've got a few more here that fall, in various spots on that list. Much like the Dylan, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, I've never really explored this that deeply until the past year or so, when I brought a nice copy into the collection. And it's another one of those things that, you've got to find the right pressing of this, because I've had some pressings in that sound horrible, and all I could think of was like, this is not good. But then I found a really decent pressing, early Motown or Tamla in this case, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I do get it. This is a good album. Culturally, musically, influence-wise, that falls onto it, I think.
Yeah. I had one, and this does hit the list quite often, but it's, Big Star. And my first listening to Big Star, I didn't like it. I wasn't getting it. Just kind of different. But repeated listenings, now it's an album that I absolutely love and can play again and again, and it's so good. And again, I would put that to me as an essential album.
I want to kick. I'm just in the interest of time. I'm going to kick 3 out here real quick that I see on lists pretty much all the time and everywhere you go. Starting off with Rumors. It's essentially a non-offensive album. I can put this on in the store at any given point in time, and if I've got a copy, folks will pick it up. And this is something that people are always looking for. It is a great album. I do really enjoy this album, and I think it's one of those ones that it could be a greatest hits in and of itself.
Yeah.
Much like the AC/DC, but I'll kick that out. We talked about Zeppelin before. You mentioned Presence was yours in through here. A lot of the lists I see bring up Physical Graffiti as a great, this is one of the Zeppelin albums to have. And you'd have to study the history of this, I think, a little bit back further to kind of get the scope of what it was. It took so long to record that by the time they finished it, it really didn't come in as recognizable from when they started it. So it's got different, just a different feel and tone from the beginning to the end. But that's another Zeppelin one. And another one that I think gets not a lot of attention, but I see it on a few lists, is Who's Next. And this is, I think, it's a great Who album in through there too, that shows up on a lot of lists. But for me, between Rumors, Physical Graffiti, and Who's Next, these are often go-tos for me that just happen to be on some folks' essential lists.
Yeah. And a few of mine, the very first Velvet Underground.
Yep.
Now, it can be any of the Velvet Underground would be on there. This is the one I think you see come up on the list the most often. And because it was so different, again, culturally significant. This one, it's not on every list, but
it isn't.
Yep,
we got a different copy here.
Yeah, yes, we got a Japanese version.
Yep.
But for me, it's essential. This again, top 10 album of all time that I would play, and so I would have to have, and then I had Public Enemy, a Nation, a Million to Hold Us Back. It was impactful. It made a difference. It was something new and different, and I would put it on, and this does make essential lists. All of those will make some, but not every list.
Yep. I guess the last one that I'll kick out here, and this is kind of a gimme as well, is the AC/DC's Back in Black. Much like the Sabbath, I think this holds its place as a tremendously influential hard rock album.
Yeah.
And from listening standpoint, much like Rumors, it's a greatest hits in and of itself. It's one that I will play often. I'll put it on when I'm in the mood. I saw AC/DC back when this was new. I saw them live in Detroit, and
that makes a difference
for a few days.
Yeah,
it does. And so that's the idea of, okay, those are essential. Do you have any more you want to show? Or is that,
just these are ones that I would say essential, but they're not on lists. I don't ever see them on the list, but I would put them as essential. The Waterboys, Fisherman's Blues, absolutely essential album to me. It would be on my list. You don't see that on the list. The Cramps, songs the Lord taught us. But folks, I think it's number 2 or number 3 on my album, so it would be essential. And then Lou Reed and John Cale, Songs for Drella. I played this a million times. It's probably one of my most played albums. I have it on CD, so it's in my vehicle that keeps going again and again and again, yet to ever tire it. I would found those as being essential, but essential is an opinion. And and my essential list would be so different than many of them that are out there. But they're a dime a dozen. Everybody has one, but that's okay. It's their opinion.
And that's what's, I think, interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, when I did a search saying, okay, what are the most essential albums? You get just article after article after article. Some of them that we've talked about here, the biggies, if you will, show up repeatedly. And I think that when you can cross over multiple authors lists or multiple YouTubers lists of essential things, and you see some repetition, those are the ones that really stand out. Yeah, your opinion, my opinion, anyone's opinion is their opinion, and whether or not you would come in and say assign value to that is really going to be up to your musical taste. You mentioned earlier it's age, it's gender, it's musical stylings, it's what genres do you like. And I got thinking about this as well. It's like, okay, who are we, Steve? We're just two guys talking about records. Who are we to say that these are essential? But again, those are our opinions. But a little bit further from that, it took me a bit to kind of realize on this, but as a record store owner, I get asked, once a week at least, and there's so many new people coming into this that I think that thirst for knowledge of what I want to start listening to records. What do I start with?
Yeah.
How do I? And sometimes those questions are specific, and I like it when the folks, they look at the posters and they say, okay, I really want to get into Rush. Where do I start? And I go, well, but it's never that simple for me because it depends on, with a band like Rush, for me, it's like, well, where you start depends upon where you are right now. Do you like prog? Do you like metal? Do you like hard rock? Where do you want to be? And then we'll start there. It's a little easier with some bands. I really want to start listening to AC/DC. Well, pick up anywhere.
Yeah.
You've got your AC/DC. But I've even had, I had some younger gentlemen come in a couple of weeks back. And I think for folks like you and I think a lot of folks who've been collecting for a long time, folks that watch our channels, respectively, you take some of this stuff for granted. But I actually did have a kid come in a couple of weeks back and said, I've just heard of this band called the Grateful Dead. I've never listened to them. Yeah. Where do I start? And that's mystifying to me. It's like, okay, well, granted, you're in your 20s. But I'm understanding. I didn't obviously ridicule or anything like that because people come from different backgrounds. But I've never heard of the Grateful Dead. Well, I'm not a Dead expert, but this is where I think you should start. You could start with Working Man's or American Beauty or something like that. Or if all else fails, go to a Greatest Hits and figure your way out from there. But I think it's easy for folks like you and I to forget that there are so many people coming into this without a great deal of experience with older music. And you think about some of these, like the Beatles, these acts have come and gone a generation before some of these kids that are getting into it have even thought about music.
I constantly ask my commenters on my channel when I show an album, they go, I really like this group. And I'll go, well, what would you recommend that I should go back and find? If it's a group I don't know about. Last week I showed Shoes. And that's my only Shoes album. I thought it was kind of 80s dated, but people were going, this is really good. And I says, where should I start? What would you recommend? And that's where, again, it's fun when people ask us that. And in a record store, obviously, that does happen. Where should I start? And it's a great question. And, you don't want to lead them around the wrong path. So they go, well, that really sucks.
Because I want them to come back. You're right.
I'm glad with that young person you weren't like Jack White. I mean, not Jack White, Jack Black on that High Fidelity. And
Ooh, no, it's not for sale.
Exactly.
He is annoying, by the way. But and I'm open to that, obviously, because I'm a businessman doing what I do here, but also because I'm a music lover. And I think that's the other thing of sharing these and trying to get across to people, these are essentials, is because we're passionate, whether it be for a certain genre, shoegaze and droning, or a certain group like Velvet Underground, or in my case, Rush. We're passionate about that, and we want to share that with as many people as we can, because we hope that people will feel the joy of listening to these groups and albums that we do when we listen to them.
Yeah, I've had numerous people write to me about Zamrock. Where should I start in Zamrock? I want to get into this. Well, let me tell you.
You are the go-to for the country.
Here's where I would go. And but yeah, it is. It's a passion. Why? Because I'm passionate about Zamrock. I love it. And so I want to lead them on a great path, on a correct path, that they will find and sample this and go, God, I really can get into this, and then go deeper.
Cool. And that is what we encourage all of you to do, is go a little bit deeper, expand your horizons. I mean, for me to say, okay, I'm going to start exploring Dylan a little bit. It's the same thing we've talked about with bluegrass and how I'm attempting to go a little in that direction and learn more about this. I think it benefits all of us as well, music lovers, but as collectors a little bit deeper, to say we want to cultivate our collections, but it needs to be done in such a way that they're things that we're going to want to have in our collection. You learned the hard way when you had to rebuild your collection. And I think other folks can avoid doing that by just paying a little more attention and asking these questions. Where do I start? Where do I go?
Yeah. Don't get hung up on an essential list. Think about your love of music, what really makes you happy. And that is your essential. And so every album you may have may not be on a single list, but it don't matter. For you, you're happy.
That is the best way to sum that up, dear sir. And I do appreciate that. So as always, viewers and listeners of ours, please let us know what you think. How essential are essential lists? I guess that's a good question to go to, isn't it? We should have started with that.
Yeah.
How essential is that? We've come full circle in that. But to let us know, head over to the Two Guys Talking About Records Facebook page. If you do Facebook, you can kick in on that. I suppose we should do an Instagram eventually. But you can always go to Steve's channel as well to catch up with him, the Steve Carlson Vinyl Community, or our channel at Radio Wasteland Records, and connect either there. But same thing goes if you're on Spotify, you can comment on there, and you can comment on our episodes via the YouTube channel. We have them on our YouTube channel at Radio Wasteland, so you can go ahead and check them out there. But as always, we'd love to hear from you. We do our best to answer, and by we, I mean Steve. So,
yeah.
Thank you. I do try. I try to get there, but running the store sometimes gets a little busy. So, all right. Well, I think that will do it for this week's edition of Two Guys Talking About Records, and essential ones at that. So until next time, my name's Jim. I am a record store owner.
And I'm Steve, an essential record collector.
There we go. Thanks again, Steve. You have a great week.
Yep, you also, Jim. Bye.